There's something quietly radical about a young man who chooses not to quit. In today's cultural climate, with all its noise and distraction, with its skepticism about the role of men in society, the mere act of sticking it out, staying in the game, is no small thing. It's not flashy, it doesn't always get applause, but it matters deeply. I don't say this lightly. We have a growing body of evidence showing that many boys and young men are struggling, falling behind in education, dropping out of the workforce, disengaging from relationships. And in the midst of all that, there's a temptation to believe what others say about you, that you're a failure, that you're lazy, that you're not needed. Those messages come not just from outside, from media narratives or broken institutions, but also from within, fire whispers that grow louder over time. Maybe they're right about me. So let me say this plainly. When you feel that pull to quit, to give up, to check out, to shrink your world, and you don't, that is a profound act of defiance. You're not just surviving, you're pushing back against the weight of low expectations. You're doing something that has become harder and harder for young men to do in our current moment. You're taking ownership of your story. We often talk about resilience as though it's some innate trait, something you either have or don't. But that's not true. Resilience is built brick by brick, day by day, in the decision to keep moving forward, especially when the odds aren't in your favor. It's forged in the gym at 6 a.m. when no one else is watching. It's found in the decision to show up to class even after you've failed the last exam. It's alive in the man who applies for another job after the last 5 rejections. These small acts may seem invisible, but they are the very stuff of character. And let's be clear, this isn't about blind toughness. We're not talking about bottling things up or pretending life doesn't hurt. That kind of stoicism, the kind that tells you to shut down and shut up, is corrosive. True strength lies not in the absence of struggle, but in facing it honestly and continuing anyway. It's about showing up even when you're unsure of your place in the world, even when you feel like you're not winning, especially then. One of the reasons this matters so much right now is because we've allowed a certain narrative to settle in that boys are simply a problem to be managed, that they're falling behind because they just aren't trying hard enough, or because they've been coddled, or because they're inherently less suited to today's world. That story is not only wrong, it's damaging. It strips away dignity. It replaces potential with shame. And far too many young men internalize it before they've even had a chance to prove otherwise. That's why the decision not to quit isn't just personal, it's cultural. Every time a young man chooses to stay in the fight, to keep showing up, he is rewriting the expectations placed on him. He's saying, I will not be reduced to a stereotype. I will not be boxed in by the failures of the system around me. I am not done yet. And that choice, made over and over, is how change begins. I've seen this in the data, yes, but more importantly, I've seen it in the lives of real people. The young man who took 5 years to finish a 2-year degree but didn't stop. The father who came back into his kids' lives after being gone too long. The boy who chose to get therapy instead of numbing himself with silence or screens. These aren't the stories that go viral, but they are the ones that shape the future. Because here's the truth, resilience is contagious. When one man chooses to prove the world wrong, others take notice. They start to question the stories they've been told about themselves, and gradually a new picture begins to form, not of brokenness, but of possibility. A generation of men rising, not in loud protest, but in quiet determination. So, if you're in that place right now, the edge of giving up, I want you to consider this. What if they're wrong about you? What if the person they said would never make it is still very much alive in you? What if you are closer to a breakthrough than you think, but the only way to find out is to stay one more day in the fight? Because if you quit now, they will be right. And that is simply not a story worth living. Yes, structural challenges are real. I won't pretend otherwise. When we talk about boys and young men today, we're not just talking about a few individuals struggling to find their way. We're looking at a set of systemic issues. Educational gaps, diminished labor market roles, the collapse of traditional pathways into adulthood, especially for working class males. These are not figments of the imagination. These are facts. And in the face of those facts, it can feel entirely rational, even inevitable, to check out. To say, what's the point? If the deck is stacked against me, why bother playing the game at all? But here's the deeper truth. Even when the system isn't working for you, even when the odds seem unfair, personal agency still matters profoundly. There's a risk right now that we conflate empathy with fatalism, that by acknowledging the difficulties young men face, we also imply they are doomed to fail unless someone else comes in and saves them. But that strips men of the very thing they most need, a sense of ownership, of authorship. The act of proving them wrong, whoever they are in your story, is not primarily an act of anger or vengeance. It's an act of reclamation. You're not proving them wrong to make them feel small. You're proving them wrong to make yourself whole. It's tempting, of course, to want the world to understand you before you move, to wait until the culture catches up, to demand that the system be fixed before you invest yourself in the process. But waiting for fairness is a trap, and for young men especially, it's a dangerous one. It creates paralysis disguised as principle, a silent erosion of ambition that starts with, they don't care about me, and ends with, so I won't care either. That's the real danger, not the system itself, but the slow internalization of powerlessness. I've met many young men who have already absorbed that script. Bright, capable, often thoughtful, but withdrawn, disengaged. They're not lazy, they're discouraged. Some of them were told explicitly or implicitly that they were unlikely to succeed. Some were treated as trouble before they ever made trouble. And some just got tired of trying so hard only to feel invisible. So let's not minimize the psychological weight of low expectations. When the world expects little of you, it takes genuine courage to expect more of yourself. But that's exactly what you have to do. Agency doesn't mean pretending the barriers aren't there. It means acknowledging the barriers and deciding to climb anyway. It means you don't need to wait for a permission slip to try. No one is coming to give it to you. And if you quit now, if you give up in this moment, the worst assumptions about you will be confirmed. The statistics will nod in silent agreement. And those voices that told you that you're a failure or a threat or a waste, they will feel vindicated. But if you don't quit, if you show up, stay in the fight, do the hard, often unglamorous work of rebuilding yourself, then you start to shift the narrative, not just for yourself, but for others watching you. Your effort becomes contagious. Your resilience becomes a reference point. You become the exception that challenges the rule and in time begins to change it. There's a subtle power in resistance, and I don't mean loud defiance. I mean quiet, steady refusal to disappear, refusal to confirm their expectations, refusal to let cynicism be the last word. In this way, proving them wrong is not just a personal act, it's a civic one. Because when young men reclaim their agency, their presence in the world changes everything. They become better fathers, stronger partners, wiser workers, more grounded leaders, and society is better for it. I want to be clear, this isn't about bravado. This isn't about pushing through pain just to prove some outdated idea of toughness. This is about endurance with purpose. The will to keep growing even when no one is applauding, even when no one believes in you yet, even when you're still unsure if the struggle will pay off. What I'm asking is not easy, but it is essential. Because if you don't act, if you don't persist, someone else will write your story for you, and they will not be kind. They will reduce you to a statistic, a trope, a cautionary tale. That's why agency matters. Not because it guarantees success, nothing does, but because it gives you a fighting chance to shape your own outcome. So if you're tired, I understand. If you've already stumbled, you're not alone. But don't stop. Don't give in to the inertia of disappointment. Keep moving, keep choosing, keep proving them wrong, because you still can. You don't just prove them wrong, you redefine what's possible. That's something we often overlook when we talk about perseverance. We frame it as this internal battle, this personal challenge to overcome. And yes, it is personal, but it's also social. It's cultural. Every time a young man chooses not to give in to the narrative that says he's lazy, lost, or lacking, he disrupts something bigger than himself. There's a script that's already been written for a lot of boys and young men today. The statistics tell a sobering story. More boys falling behind in school, more young men withdrawing from the labor market, record numbers reporting isolation and purposelessness. And once those numbers start shaping the narrative, society begins to lower its expectations quietly, almost politely. It starts assuming less of them, less success, less stability, less contribution. That script becomes self-fulfilling. fulfilling. When you're treated as if you're going to fail, quitting starts to feel like the default. But here's the thing. When one person pushes back against that expectation, it doesn't just serve him, it sends a signal to everyone else. A young man who stays the course in school even when no one expects him to. A father who chooses to stay present in his child's life even after a difficult separation. A boy who raises his hand in class again after years of being overlooked. These aren't small acts. They're acts of defiance against a culture that has, in many ways, given up on them. When you refuse to quit, when you keep showing up, especially when it would be easier not to, you are quietly telling the world that its assumptions were wrong. But more than that, you start to offer a new picture of what success can look like for men today. Not the old model of stoic invulnerability or dominance or emotional silence, but one of grit and grace, one where strength isn't about winning every battle, but about continuing to show up for the ones that matter. And people notice, especially those watching from the sidelines, because whether we realize it or not, we're always modeling something. There's always someone younger, your brother, your son, a kid in your neighborhood, who's watching to see what's possible. And when he sees you fight through setbacks, own your failures, get back up without shame, he starts to think maybe he can too. One of the most damaging myths we perpetuate is that success is individual, that it's earned in isolation, but it's not. It's communal, it's relational. Every time a man chooses not to quit, he's not just helping himself, he's expanding the boundaries of what other men might believe is possible for them. It's a ripple effect. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. There's a reason many do give up. It can feel like you're pushing uphill with no one behind you. It can feel thankless. And when you're carrying the weight of past disappointments, systemic inequality, or just the raw exhaustion of trying to hold it together, it's understandable to want out. But staying in it, that's how change starts. Quietly, one decision at a time, not with fireworks, but with resolve. And we need more of those quiet revolutions. We need more men who aren't waiting for perfect conditions before they act, who know that proving others wrong isn't about ego, but about possibility. Because when you don't quit, when you keep showing up despite the noise, the doubt, the easy exits, you're offering a new vision, not just for yourself, but for everyone who's been told the same tired story. The world doesn't change through sweeping declarations. It changes through people making different choices than the ones they were told were available. It changes when someone like you says, no, that's not how my story ends. I know what they said. I know what they expect, but I am not finished. So don't quit. Because the moment you keep going, especially when everything around you says stop, is the moment you begin to rewrite the script, and others will follow your lead. A lot of people think quitting is a sudden event, a decision made in a moment of crisis, dramatic, visible. But that's rarely how it happens, especially for young men today. Quitting often isn't loud, it's slow, quiet, and almost invisible. It creeps in through small acts of disengagement. A missed class here, skip responsibilities there, turning the camera off in a Zoom meeting, not texting back, not showing up, not because you don't care, but because something inside starts whispering that maybe it doesn't matter if you try anymore, that maybe they're right about you, that maybe you're not going to make it. And that's exactly where the danger lies. The narrative that surrounds so many young men now is not just about individual failure. It's systemic, it's cultural. We've created this climate where it's become easy to expect less from boys, to assume that if they fall behind, they'll stay behind. And over time, that low expectation becomes internalized. It's not just that society doesn't expect you to succeed. It's that eventually you stop expecting it from yourself. But here's the truth. Quitting isn't a single moment. It's a pattern. And the good news is patterns can be broken. When we talk about proving them wrong, it's not about bravado. It's not about trying to look strong on the outside while collapsing internally. It's about making small, deliberate decisions to re-engage, to interrupt that pattern, to show up, even if you feel like it won't matter, to submit the assignment even if it's late, to get out of bed on a hard morning, to go to the job interview even if you're not feeling confident. These aren't heroic acts on the surface, but they are courageous. Because in those moments, you're refusing to let the narrative that you'll fail, that you'll give up, that you'll quit be the final word. What we're seeing, especially in working class communities, have among men without college degrees is a slow erosion of connection to work, to family, to a sense of purpose. When men feel that the game is rigged, that their role in society is unclear or undervalued, it becomes easier to slip into passivity. You don't drop out all at once, you fade. And that fading is rarely noticed until it's become a lifestyle. But it's also in those unnoticed moments where the opportunity to change lives, because the truth is, you don't need a grand reinvention. You need small acts of defiance, of saying, not today. I'm not quitting today. That's where the power lies. I often think about what it means to prove people wrong in this context. It's not about revenge or spite, though let's be honest, sometimes that's part of the fuel. It's deeper than that. It's about reclaiming your own narrative. It's saying you don't get to define me by my worst days. It's about building a foundation that maybe no one else can see yet. Not your teachers, not your parents, not even your friends, but you're building it anyway. And maybe even more importantly, you're modeling something for others without even realizing it. When you push through, when you stay in the fight, you give silent permission to others around you to do the same. Because one of the most damaging things about quitting is that it's contagious. But so is courage, so is effort, so is resilience. We underestimate the power of a man who decides to stay committed to growth, to learning, to rebuilding, to becoming, especially when everything around him has suggested that quitting is inevitable. There's a kind of quiet masculinity in this, not loud, not